In this class, we are only to learn the first three. The first three contain the requirement, design, and implementation. After is testing and updating. So we do not have the condition for you to do updating here. So here we first introduce this one, software requirement. This chapter has the objectives or purpose or goals. The goals are to introduce the concepts of what? Of two different category of requirement. The first one is a user requirement, and the second one is a system requirement. Okay, if we only give you this term, can you guess what's this user requirement mean and what is the system requirement mean? This is a question for you. Someone can tell me. User requirement for who to read. System requirement for whom to read. Who can try to guess?
Laushi, can you repeat the question, please?
This class, we will introduce you requirements. Requirements have two categories. First is the user requirement. Second is system requirement. So normally, who is required to read user requirement and who is responsible for system requirement?
If I remember correctly, the system requirement is basically writing down what needs to be inside the software so the guys making the software can understand it properly. Like the person designing the software, he needs to understand the system requirements. And the user requirements states what each user will be doing. So I think that's for the client, I believe. My memory is a bit hazy. I knew the answer, but I think I forgot.
Good. Very close. Very close. Actually, both requirements are writing by development team. Writing by the development team, like writing by you. Okay, writing by you. But the most difference is the user requirement. Normally, you will invite the client, the end user, to help you to write it. So this user requirement normally not for you to read. They are for end user or your client to read it, to check whether this requirement is fulfill their really requirement. But the system requirement normally only written by development team. They will not be seen by the end user or client. They only to do for the communication in development team. Okay. So the user requirement is writing for end user without professional terms, but the system requirement normally written in computer professional terms, only read for development team. And the next one, the course objectives, to describe functional and non-functional requirement. And who can guess what is functional and what is non-functional? Who can guess? What functional mean? What non-functional mean?
I think I remember this one. Functional requirement is the requirements of the software itself, like the features and functions the software is to perform. Like if we're talking about a calculator to add, divide, subtract, etc., that's functional requirement. Non-functional requirement does not relate to the actual function of the software, but these are requirements that are necessary for the software to run in a useful manner. Like if you have a calculator, but it takes 10 hours to do 2 plus 2, that is not usable. So the non-functional requirement is to make it do the calculations fast or to be intuitive, easy to use. These type of things, secure, reliable, and it does not crash every 2 minutes. These things are non-functional requirements,
Yes,
according as far as I remember.
yes, you are right, Zuka. You are right. The functional requirements normally means the function or the service this software shall provide. Okay, this is functional, but non-functional is not about the function, not about the service that software provide. Non-functional means like performance of software, or like the environment of the software, and even the language the software should use. Like non-functional requirement require you should use Java to development the server side. You should run this software in Linux environment like this. And like performance, the latency should less than 200 millisecond latency like this. This is non-functional. And the third goal of this chapter to explain how software requirement may be organized in requirement document. Okay, so this is the things you should submit to me. This is called requirement documentation. Okay, requirement is not a term, but also a engineering process. This is the process of establishing the service or called functions that the customer requests from a system, and also here constraint. Two things, service and the constraint under which it operates and is developed. This constraint has many explanation here. Like you should use Java, you should deploy on Linux, you should use Circle server, do not use MySQL like this constraint. And the requirements themselves are the description of the system. You should know. Requirement itself actually is only the description, like a documentation of the system function and the constraint that are generated during this process, during this requirement process. So from this slide, you should know, in your requirement documentation, you have two important things. First is the function you should describe. Second is the constraint you should describe. And what is the requirement? Describe what things? It may range from a very high level abstract statement of a function of a system constraint to a detailed mathematical functional requirement specification. So high-level statement is for user to read, and the detailed mathematical